and they rob you blind and you thank them for it. That's a tragedy. That's a scam. That's why I'm saying this right now. Americans, you don't need a tariff. You need a revolution. For decades, your government and oligarchs ship your job to China, not for diplomacy, not for peace, but to exploit cheap labors. And in the process, they hollowed out your middle class, crushed your working class, and told you to be proud while they sold your future for profit. And yes, China made money, but we used it to build roads, lift millions out of poverty, fund healthcare, raise living standard. We reinvested in our people. My family also benefited from it. What did your oligarchs do? They bought yachts, private jets, mansions with golf course driveways. They manipulate the market, dodge tax, and poured billions into endless wars. And you get stagnated wages, crippling healthcare costs, cheap dopamine, debt, and flagged wave probably made in China while they pick your pocket. For 40 years, both China and the United States benefit from the trade, the manufacturing, but only one of us use that wealth to build. This isn't China's fault. This is yours. You let this happen. You let the oligarchs fit your lies. Well, they made you fat, poor, and addicted. Now they blame China for mess they made. I don't think so. I don't think you need another tariff. You need to wake up. You need to take your country back. I think you need a revolution. They rob.
All right, what's going on, everybody? It's Professor Zeus, and I'm back with another video. Yo, if this is your first time at the channel, just know I greatly appreciate you for stopping by. Go ahead and hit subscribe. We're on our way to 2,000 subscribers. We're taking it the humble route. Guys, if you saw my last few videos, I've been talking about, a lot of things that's going on in America. One of the other videos I spoke about was, a lot of commotion has been going about, with these tariffs and the trade war going on. A lot of people in China decided to, essentially expose luxury brands. A lot of people knew about this already. A lot of people didn't. And, now that's the conversation that's, flooding the algorithm. But now, I just want to shift gears a little bit to talk about the bigger picture. I'm going to put this link of this TikTok in the description. But, this whole, U.S. China trade war, this guy has a lot of points specifically about, America's, infrastructure and, whether or not we can pin all of our problems on China. Obviously, I'm a proud American, but we have to be able to call out hypocrisy when we see it. So let's try to break it down, look at the facts, and, you decide for yourself how to view the world, So for years, right, we've heard the same story that, China's cheating, they're rigging the system, they're breaking all the rules, and essentially they're stealing and cheating their way up to the top of the totem pole. Everyone hears a lot of different buzzwords like, forced technology transfers, intellectual property theft, state subsidies, dumping currency manipulation, so many different types of things. And, obviously there are some real issues. China is not innocent. I don't think any country is innocent. They've pushed hard for unfair advantages like, demanding a lot of the Western companies to share technology to access their market. But if we're being honest, nobody has ever held a gun to our heads, right? Meaning American companies saw potential profits in China's massive market. They said, we're all in, even if it meant teaching China how to build what we've already mastered. Why? Because our CEOs, they weren't thinking 20 years ahead. They were just chasing next quarter's profit. And what about us? Obviously, we're not innocent either. The U.S. subsidizes agriculture, bails out Wall Street and, funnels billions and billions into tech through things like the CHIPS Act. Every country plays the game to protect its interests, and China manipulates its currency. China, China manipulates its currency, sure, right? But so do others, right? Probably including us, right? When it suits our needs. The point is, we've been pointing fingers at China while ignoring our own choices. We, sent so many factories overseas, dismantled unions and told workers. Remember how, President Biden was saying everybody needs to learn how to code, different things like that. And I'm not saying that's not a good skill set, but, you have towns and cities where, textile and steel industries essentially just vanished. Meanwhile, the Dow Jones, they hit record highs. So who's really to blame? Now, if we're talking about what's happening here in the United States, our infrastructure has fallen apart. We've had so many different bridges collapse, roads crumbling, power grids failing. And if you compare that to China, China is essentially the leading world in electric vehicles and high-speed rails. Why? Because while we were how can I put this, financializing our economy or pouring money into speculative bubbles and tax cuts for the ultra wealthy, China was putting its head down and building. They invested in roads, factories, their energy grids, and new industries from the ground up. We didn't necessarily do that. Instead, we've gutted public schools, we've underfunded vocational training, and we've let our supply chains hollow out. Now, again, this whole conversation about exposing the luxury brands and things like that is going all over on the algorithm, it's a perfect example. Luxury brands rely on cheap labor overseas while American textile workers struggle. And what did we do with our trade surpluses back in the day? We didn't rebuild highways or modernize factories. What we did is we chased stock buybacks and shareholder payouts. Now everybody's like shocked that China's outpacing us in manufacturing. But it's like, come on, right? We can't just blame them for our own failures. And again, I'm not saying China's perfect. Obviously, they have their own issues, from intellectual property theft to, state-backed hacking, right? But we need to do our own part. We chose short-term gains over long-term strength. And now, for some reason, we think tariffs are the answer. Tariffs are like duct tape on a collapsing bridge. They raise prices, disrupt supply chains, and invite retaliation, which is why you see all these retaliatory tariffs from countries in the United States, specifically China. They don't bring back factories or create jobs. And again, I'll specify 80% of people agree that manufacturing jobs need to come back to the United States. But out of that 80%, 20% wouldn't be caught dead leaving their desk job to work in a coal mine or in a factory, right? So it sounds great, but who's really going to do it? Unless, with Doge and different things like that, maybe all the federal workers who've been laid off, maybe, that's their whole plan, which is what I talked about in my last video, to gut the federal government with what Elon said is like cut people from low productivity jobs into manufacturing jobs. Maybe that's the goal all along, right? So essentially tariffs are a band-aid. They're not really the blueprint. So, what do we do? I think if we want Americans to really thrive, we need a real concrete plan, not distractions, not empire building, not endless wars. Right now, we're spending billions on proxy, conflicts in Yemen, Iran, so many different things in the Middle East, and right. But we have so many of our cities look like war zones, right? How are we spending so much money in the Middle East for war, but our own cities here look like war zones? We're pushing military aid packages and guarding pipelines, halfway across the globe, but our own borders, they're a mess. And veterans are living in tents. That's not America first. That's the empire first. Here's what the America first model looks like, right? A national industrial policy that invests in key sectors like manufacturing, technology, and energy. We build high-speed rails, like I'm talking about trains that move from California to DC. We modernize our grid. We clean our water. People in Flint still got dirty water. Again, people in Flint still have dirty water. We fund vocational training and apprenticeships so skilled labor gets the respect it deserves. We break up monopolies. We punish putting all these jobs overseas. We ban stock buybacks and reward companies that hire in America and stay in America, right? Invest in our workers, invest in our cities, and invest in our families, which will, in essence, increase our sovereignty. We don't need another $1 trillion war. And if you saw, we have increased the defense budget. I don't know if you guys saw it. Maybe I should do a video on that, but we've increased the budget for our defense. We need $1 trillion investments in America, right? We have to be extremely focused, stop looking at all these distractions, essentially stop policing the whole world and start rebuilding our country. That's how we make America great again, by building it and not blaming others, right? And that's my honest take. You know, I love this country. I love America, but love means being able to call out the truth even when it's uncomfortable, right? And again, China is not blameless, right? But neither are we. The question is, what do we do now, right? I want to hear from you. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Should we focus on rebuilding America or should we keep pointing fingers? Hit that like button if you want more deep dives and breakdowns like this, and share this video to, try to keep the conversation going and send it to somebody who might see some value in it. Subscribe. We're on our way to 2,000 subscribers, and hit that bell notification so you always get notified when I drop a new video. And never, ever forget, it's you and I verse. Information, application, execution. Until next time, peace.